Hi everyone, welcome to Table for Two. I am the Elusive Bigfoot.
And I'm Onezie.
And today we are going to be talking about something that we did year long, which was our 10 by 10. A 10 by 10 is when you choose 10 games that you're going to play 10 times throughout the year. And we did this because we really wanted to get more adept at a lot of our games that we have and our skills.
So, because we love games, we didn't do a 10 by 10. We did a 12 by 10. We couldn't take things off the list or forsake a certain games. So we ended up doing 12 games 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually a 12 by 10. First game we're going to talk about. We didn't play these in any particular order. We kind of ping-ponged around. So it's not really a ranking, or we're not shaking the camera or making judgments about the games. We're just going through them and talking about them.
Yeah.
The first one we're going to talk about is Lord of the Rings, Journeys in Middle-earth. Designed by Nathan Hajek and Grace Holdinghouse. Published by Fantasy Flight Games. This is a great game. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
We love this game. For anyone who played D&D as a teenager or is really into the Lord of the Rings in any way, you know, back in the D&D days, when a million years ago in the last century, when I was a teenager, you could never play the canon characters, right? Because it was all generic elf, generic dwarf, generic fighter. Now you can play Gimli, right? And you can play Legolas, right? It's official, and you can do it. And one of the great things about it is there's an app that goes with the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new class of games that have apps that go with them that make playing the game a little bit easier. So any of the work that the Dungeon Master would used to do in D&D, the app for Lord of the Rings does that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't need to chuck the dice. You don't need to figure out your damage, or you just tell it whether you're going to run away, whether you're going to fight, whether you're going to go look behind the wall, whatever. And it's really fun. You get to play the characters from Lord of the Rings.
And one thing I liked, besides it having miniatures and really making it feel like you were really there in the moment, is that instead of, like he was mentioning, checking dice and rolling to see whether or not you were successful or not, you're going to flip over cards. And depending on the emblem that's on the card, it'll tell you whether or not it was a success or a failure. And then you plug in that information to the app, and then they tell you what was the result, whether or not you succeeded or failed. The next game that we're going to talk about is Villainous. And in this case, it's both Disney Villainous and Marvel Villainous by Ravensburger, designed by Prospero Hall. This is a game that uses hand management. There is variable player powers because you're going to be playing different villains that have different powers. And there's also an element of take that, which is how we thwarted our opponent so that we could win. And I absolutely love Villainous games. Every game, every role is different. You get to play many different characters. I think at this point I probably have close to 20 different characters that we can choose from, and they're all compatible within the Disney realm. And then the Marvel, you have to just keep with the Marvel set. But the decks and the boards are beautiful art. They're all themed beautifully to that particular villain, and your personal goal will be based on who you are going to be. So for instance, if I was playing the Queen of Hearts, then my goal is going to be to turn the card guards into wickets and then shoot a croquet successfully through them.
Yeah, so Villainous, the good thing about Villainous, we own lots of different Villainous games.
Mm-hmm.
And each one adds on to the base game, at least the Disney ones.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing is that you have a lot of characters to choose from. We own lots of Disney Villainous games, and you can choose a lot of different characters, and it never gets old.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to talk about Splendor, designed by Marc Andre and published by Space Cowboys, plus a bunch of other publishers, but we'll just mention the first one. So Splendor is a game of greed, avarice, and prestige. You lay out some cards which represent gems, and then you use coins to buy the gems. And once you have attained a bunch of gems, you attract the attention of nobles, and all of these things
Mm-hmm.
give you victory points, or prestige points as they are in this game. And this is just a fun, subtle engine builder. The more gems you got, the more gems you can get, and whoever gets to 15 first wins the game. It's one of my favorite games.
One thing I enjoy about this particular game that we put on the 10 by 10 is that one year for Christmas, Armand received a game of expansions. A box of expansions. It had like 3 or 4 different ones in there. So it really gave us the opportunity not just to play Splendor, but to play the different variations that there are. The next game on our list that we're going to talk about is Marvel Champions, the card game. This one is by Fantasy Flight, and it is designed by Michael Boggs, Nate French, and Caleb Grace. Some of the mechanics involve being a co-op, because we all know that we like playing co-op. Hand management, where you're choosing from your cards about which one you're going to play on that turn. It is a campaign style, meaning that you can pick a scenario and then you'll add different villains or different bank scenarios, or maybe you're trying to stop a bombing or something, and just different type of things. And of course, variable player powers, because one thing that is specific in Marvel Champions is you will get to play the alter ego. So for instance, Peter Parker, or you can flip it over and play Spider-Man. And it comes with 4 different heroes, and then you can buy so many different expansions for this. I loved this game. I really didn't think I would like this as much as I did, because I already had other kind of Marvel superhero games. I'm like, why would I need another one? But I don't know another game that does it like this, where you get to play both the hero and the alter ego, and depending on who you are at that moment is what powers you'll have.
Yeah, that alter ego flip is super fun, because everyone wants to be the Hulk, but sometimes you want to be Bruce Banner too. Mm-hmm. And you have different powers when you're Bruce Banner than you do when you're the Hulk. And that one little mechanic just makes it super fun. It also makes it so that different things happen to you mm-hmm. at the end of the turn or the round. Mm-hmm. If you're the hero,
right,
you get attacked. If you're
alter ego,
then the scheme or whatever.
Yeah, it'll make if you on the scheme, you'll get points against you if you don't stop that scheme. And if you're the alter ego, that scheme is going to get the attack points. So you want to always figure out, are we trying to prevent that, or am I trying to attack the villain? Make those choices.
The official word for defeating a scheme is thwarting it, which I love the word thwart. So that's why I like this game, because I can thwart the scheme. Next up, we're going to talk about Parks, designed by Henry Audubon, published by Keymaster Games. Okay, so Parks is super fun, and it's about hiking. So you lay out a trail of tiles. You have little wooden hiker characters, mm-hmm. and it's a worker placement. Wherever you put your hiker, you get a resource or you do a thing, and you have 2 hikers that can kind of leapfrog over each other, and the whole game is just beautiful. It's painted different national parks, and you visit them, mm-hmm. and you get points for visiting the parks, and you manage your trees and your sunshine and your wood and whatever. Mm-hmm. Your resources. It's really beautiful. It's of course played over 4 rounds, which is the 4 seasons. Mm-hmm. So it's nice and short. It's not a forever game, and the whole thing is just beautiful. I love it.
I really like this game. I discovered this game the first time we played it was actually at Dice Tower West a couple of years ago, and one thing that I was so impressed about when I bought this game is the compactness of the box and all the components. Like, it only fits one way. And so the first time I got it and I had to try to put it away, I'm like, I don't understand how this fits in the box. And then once you get used to it, it's just fits like a puzzle so beautifully. And so it also, the art reminds me almost like postcards, like when you visit a park and it describes the sequoia or Yosemite or something like that. Just beautiful.
So you talked about fitting it in the box too, and I'll just mention here that it comes with a component tray, mm-hmm. 2 different component trays. So you have your own little stash of resources for getting and taking things from the supply, and it is very well designed.
Mm-hmm. The next game on our list that we are going to talk about is Legendary, a Marvel deck building game. This is by Upper Deck Entertainment, and it's designed by Devin Lowe. This game is a deck builder. Again, it's co-op, but this one is a semi-co-op because even though we're working together to battle the villains, there are victory points assigned to each villain that you overcome, and whoever gets the most is going to be the ultimate winner. There's also variable setup depending on which villains you wish to play. I have an app that I like to use called Assemble, where it'll tell you, take this particular scenario, these henchmen, these villains, this mastermind, this scheme twist, put that together and that'll be your villain deck, and it'll play with these heroes. So it kind of like lays it out pretty well. Together, we are going to be having a deck of cards. We're going to buy new cards to add to our own deck so that way we can battle the villains, and the entire time the villains are trying to escape the city and they're just moving down this track. And sometimes you'll lose the game if too many villains escape, or if there's also bystanders leave, or if you run out of the villain deck, then you didn't beat your villains.
So I like this. I don't know if I like it, but it's co-op but not. That's the way I would phrase it. Co-op but not.
So what do you not like about it?
Well, one, it's not fully co-op. So yes, we beat the villains, but now we're going to count up and see who gets the bragging rights.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, to be fair, you don't have to do that part. If you want it to be fully co-op, it's just, did we beat it or not?
The other thing I like about it is just the way the villains progress down the track. So they're in a certain part of town. They're on the rooftop, or they're on the bridge, or wherever, and so sometimes they'll be weaker if they're on the bridge, or stronger if they're on the rooftop. So it gives you more opportunities to try to beat them that way too.
One particular thing I loved when we did this in our 10 by 10 is that after a certain point, we felt like we pretty much mastered this game. And I also have a set that is Big Trouble in Little China. And the very last two games, what we decided to do was to combine both games together. So we had the Pork Chop Express, which is that big semi-truck from Big Trouble in Little China, but we put that in the Marvel universe along with Spider-Man and the Hulk and Thor, and we just kept crisscrossing stuff, and I loved doing that.
It worked.
It did.
Why not? Why not?
Why not?
Our next game is Dice Forge, designed by Regis Bonasse and published by Libelud. Did I say that right?
I don't know.
Libelud. And so Dice Forge is an interesting game. As you would guess, there are lots of dice in Dice Forge. But the great thing about it is that you can tweak the dice. In other games with dice, you get to swap out your dice or use different dice. But in this game, you get to actually physically pry the face off of the die and put a new face on it. So say I had a die that I rolled and it gave me 1 gold. I could at some point replace that with a face that has 2 gold on it. And now when I roll it, if I roll that one, I would get 2 gold, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a worker placement game, and you go around this forge and you are either doing the actions on cards, which get you benefits, or you're going to the forge and you're buying or making die faces and actually prying them off the die and pasting them on. So the only thing more fun than dice chucking is dice building. So I love this game for that.
I also really love that game. I felt like I had a bit of control over what I wanted to have on my dice, and so maybe I was going to play for a lot more of the gold coins, or maybe I was going to play for a lot more of the moon shards. But it gave me, a bit of strategy ahead of time as to how I was going to play to win.
Another good thing about this one is once you figure out how it works, I think it's a 9-round game or something like that. It's a limited number of rounds. So you're not going to fall into this trap of forever. You can time out your strategy. I got to get here by round 4. I got to get here by round 8, whatever, to try to win the game.
Yeah, the most points within those rounds wins. The next game we're going to talk about is Wonder Woman. It is Challenge of the Amazons. It is published by Ravensburger and another one by Prospero Hall. So they did the Disney and the Marvel Villainous, and they also did Wonder Woman. This is a co-op game that has variable player powers because each character you're gonna choose is from the Amazon. So you're not just Wonder Woman. You could be one of the other Amazons there. You can. It also has some limited communication because before you play your cards, you can talk a little bit about what you intend to do. But once you pick up all your cards and you can see what you have, now everyone is kind of on their own, which really eliminates someone being an alpha player and taking over the game because I have no idea what he has. He has no idea what I have. We know we want to try and help each other, but then maybe all of a sudden the cards in my hand will help me fight the villain over here rather than go get the amulet or the braces over here. So also, let me see, what else do I want to say about that? There are different villains that you can battle, and with each villain, there are different ways to use the different components that are in the game. So one thing that we did as we got more and more adept at the game was we put our own challenges to make this game harder for ourselves.
Yeah, that was one thing that I noticed is after we played this game 3 or 4 times, it was pretty easy to beat the initial villain or the initial scenario. So the rules themselves suggest either starting with less life or giving the villain more life and making that a challenge. But we also just set up some obstacles, random obstacles for ourselves to see what to try to overcome. And it's still a fun game. It's fun for me because I got to learn about all the other Amazons.
Right.
Everyone knows about Wonder Woman, but there's all the other characters in there too. And it's really fun to play them and learn about them. And you get to throw spears at monsters. That's great.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed, I don't know that for myself that I felt like it got too easy after 3 or 4 games, but I think 3 or 4 games against one particular villain, then I understood what was the strategy to beat that. And, like Armand said, the best thing we could do was make the game harder for ourselves. So it actually, there were a couple of times when it got pretty close. I think we even lost a couple. So thumbs up, like the game.
Next up, we're going to talk about Maracaibo, designed by Alexander Pfister, published by Games Up. So before we dive into it, I want to mention that we have the modern version of this game, or an updated edition of this game. The original game had a little bit of controversy surrounding it, not being culturally or racially sensitive. But we're going to talk about the version that we've got. So you basically are a ship captain sailing around the Caribbean, fighting for either France, England, or Spain, or all 3 of them. And you're trying to gather resources and explore and conquer islands. Right? So this has got a lot of different mechanics to it and a lot of different tracks, a lot of different ways to win. It is all about victory points at the end, like a lot of other games. There are a lot of cards and tiles. What else can I say about this game?
One thing that we did is when we played this game, we chose to play the campaign, which you can either play the campaign style or you can just play a game with certain amount of rounds in it. And we were curious to follow the story to see how it would go. And it was kind of funny because, as Armand mentioned, it was, very culturally sensitive in this particular game. So it did not talk about a lot of different subjects. It was just talking about exploring and needing to get medicine back to the different towns that you pass. And so the story was okay, but I really appreciated the mechanics of how you sail around and then the choices of which path are you going to go. Like, I really need to get these resources over here, but if I just go this shorter path, even though I don't get these resources, I'll be the first one in line, I'll get more points. So there was just so many choices, like you said, which kind of game do I want to play this time? The next game that I'm going to talk about is Aquatica. Aquatica is a game that I first discovered at Dice Tower West a few years ago. It's produced by Cosmodrome Games, and it's designed by Ivan Tizovsky. It is a deck building and hand management game And this is a game unlike I've ever seen anywhere else. You have a board and you have your cards, and the cards have different items that you can have depending on how deep you dive into the ocean. As you take advantage of a resource, you push the card up. So now you see what is available below that, and then you push it up higher and higher. When you get to the bottom, it's like a sea chest, and you try to claim those points. You also have different cards in your hand that you start with, and those will give you different powers. When you use up all your cards, you just get them back in your hand, and then you play. At any time, you can gather all your cards back in your hand. So it's really your timing. When is the best time to retrieve your hand, and when is the best time for you to acquire more cards for your board so you can get those treasures?
Yeah, so this game really thematically is great because it's all about exploring the deep sea, and the whole mechanic of pushing the card up makes you feel like you're sinking down below the ocean. It's also a game where you have a starting hand, and you can play any card from your hand during your turn, but then you gain more cards as the game goes on. That gives you more options. And I really love this deep sea game. It felt like diving in the deep sea. Mm-hmm. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Pandemic Legacy Season 0, designed by Rob Deval and Matt Leacock, published by Z-Man Games. I'm going to try to do this with no spoiler alerts because it's a legacy game.
It's a legacy game.
And for those of you that don't know, legacy games are like the normal game, but you change it in permanent ways with stickers and tearing up cards, and there's a storyline, that is followed. So no spoilers there, right? But if you've played the other pandemic games, you're trying to cure a disease, right? That's the main idea of the pandemic games. But in Season 0, it's kind of a prequel to all that. Is during the Cold War, you have the Russians and the Allies and the neutral countries, and you're basically a spy running around trying to do these different tasks to prevent a disease from happening. And it's a co-op game. It's really fun, and gosh, Cold War spies, that's great.
This particular Pandemic Legacy game was my favorite out of the 3 that have come out so far. There's Season 1, Season 2, and then they came out with Season 0. And I think for me, the reason why I like this the most, it was not your typical pandemic type of game. There were a lot more puzzles and code breaking that we needed to do in this particular one.
Spy stuff.
Yeah, it was great spy stuff. And you also, if you've played the other 2 games, you got to see the backstory of how this all came to be. So I highly recommend playing this, and I would recommend playing Season 1, Season 2, and then going to Season 0. I wouldn't play Season 0 first. I would definitely do that one last. But that's my preference. And if you've ever seen us review other Pandemic Legacy games, we did not tear up the cards. We did not sticker the board. Oh no, I have a little baggie called Destroyed that we put the destroyed stuff in, and I use Post-its on my board. Our last game that we're going to talk about today, our 12th game, is The Captain is Dead by AEG. This is designed by Joe Price and JT Smith. This is a co-op game. You have your hand management, and there's also open drafting, meaning that we're going to choose together who's going to get which cards for our hand based on the different scenario that we have. Also, there's variable player power. We're each going to choose one of the characters. And this game is amazing because it's very similar to, if you've seen any sci-fi shows, such as Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, I could just keep going, at Stargate. It has that feel. The first thing you have to do is you have to start damaging your ship. So you take a lot of damage before the game even starts, and then as soon as you start, maybe the engines are down, the computer is down, you already have a bunch of aliens here, maybe someone even got hurt. And now you got to go fix things because the goal of the game is to fix the engines, fire them off, and get out of there. Limping out of there, but you got to get out of there. And I loved this game because sometimes I was the doctor. Once I was, I think, what was she? Like the bartender was like Guinan from Star Trek, or the hologram, or the disposable security officer. I just love this game. And by the end of us playing it 10 times, we kind of figured out which characters we found are the most necessary to be successful. And even then, most of the time we lost. I think it was the admiral and the engineer that we felt is important to start with. And then if you want to add a third one in there, you could.
Yeah, I was going to point out that this is really fun. It's just panic. You know, you're trying to repair stuff the whole time while
the computers are down, and there's a missile coming towards you, but we ran out of missiles.
And there's aliens on the bridge. But the whole point of the game is to get the engine started and get out of there. So you're just constantly putting out fires everywhere, literally putting out fires everywhere, trying to repair stuff.
And just as soon as you repair it, the next card is going to take it back down again.
Yeah. So, and it's played pretty well with two people, but we usually put a third character in there, neutral character. We would take turns deciding what the neutral character did. So if you're doing it 2 players, just a heads up.
Yeah, we found that was, we got that from some other team that we saw play this as well. They played with a third character, and it really does work the best, I felt. Okay, so that is all 12. Tell me, what are your thoughts about, what did you like about this last year, about our 10 by 10 or a 12 by 10?
The 12 by 10. Yeah, so one thing I really like about this is we did a deep dive into all these games. You play a game 10 times. You really learn about all the mechanics of it, the strategy of it, whether you like it, whether you don't, what things you like, what you don't. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
I really liked being able to set time aside with you, my favorite game partner, and play these games. I just don't get tired of them. I really do love playing games. And I grew to love, we created this list together. Together we created this list. And there were some games that Armand put on there I wasn't quite sure I would want to play. But I'll tell you, by the end of the 10, I was like, I really, really love this game. So I found that I got better at some of the mechanics. I got better at the games, definitely. And yeah, I definitely say that we'll hang on to those games for another year.
Next year, we're going to do a 10 by 10, an actual 10 by 10, not a 12 by 10. So 10 games, 10 times. There'll be different games than the ones we did this year. And we'll be sure to let you know what those are and how we like playing them.
Yeah, I think that they'll be more campaign-based. They're definitely going to be different games than what we've done so far. And it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Until next time, remember, anytime is game o'clock.